Before we can explore how addiction works in the brain, we must first look at how the brain works. Our brains consist of several large regions, each being responsible for a different set of functions necessary for living, from basic functions like digestion and breathing, to coordination and movement, and finally to more complex functions like thinking and sensing. All areas of the brain are made up of billions of nerve cells. The messages that control all our brain functions are transmitted from one nerve cell to the other through the release of chemical substances known as neurotransmitters. One very important circuit of nerve cells that spans a number of areas of the brain is called the pleasure or reward circuit. Dopamine is one of the key neurotransmitters active in the reward circuit. All life-sustaining activities such as eating, sexual activity, and nurturing increase the level of dopamine in the brain reward circuit. The idea is that when something is good for our survival, we experience pleasure, so we want to do it again. At the University of Colorado Health Sciences Center, Shelley Dickinson is using lab animals to study the effects of cocaine and the neurotransmitter dopamine on the brain, in order to better understand how addiction affects the brain.
Transporter. So we can measure brain function and behavior at exactly the same time. There, where the line is going up, it's detecting increased dopamine concentrations around the electrode. There are dopamine receptors in a lot of different parts of the brain. The part that we're most interested in is part of the reward circuitry. It's part of the nucleus accumbens and the striatum, which are known to have large numbers of dopamine receptors, and they've been shown to be involved in the reward of a lot of different drugs. Dopamine in these areas increase when you give drugs to the animals, when you give alcohol, cocaine, opiates, amphetamine. It increases in dopamine release, and it also increases with food reward. You can get increases in dopamine with sexual activity, increases in dopamine with water, with the thirsty rat. So any sort of natural reward seems to activate this reward mechanism, this circuitry in the brain. And so natural rewards, and then drugs maybe do. Once the drugs take over, they usurp that mechanism that normally food or water or sex or nurturing or all these other pleasant activities that we have that can increase dopamine levels in the brain. And then those things no longer can do that. The whole reward circuitry isn't just dopamine. The opioids are involved. Glutamate is involved, which is another neurotransmitter in the brain. It's very responsible for learning. And so dopamine, you need the dopamine for the reward. But then to really get addicted, you also need activity of the glutamate system. Because it is a learning sort of curve. It's a learning, there's learning components to it that are very similar to all other types of learning.